Welcome to Season 3 of Alone. 10 contestants have been dropped off in Patagonia. The last one standing wins $500,000. Enough chit-chat. Let's bring out our first contestant, Jim. Right off the bat, he gives this beautiful place a big hug. Creeks, bamboo, mountains, forests. It looks like this place has decent resources. Jim, with an axe in hand, starts a new chapter in his life. His first task? Building a shelter, and this flat spot right here is perfect. As he works, he introduces himself. He's a high school teacher with 8 years of survival teaching experience. A positive attitude, that's his motto for his students. He and his wife never had kids of their own, but they adopted 3 boys, his little treasures. While setting up his tent, Jim fights back the homesickness. With a shelter up, next is making a fire. He scrapes off some fluffy stuff from the bark for tinder. Just a little is enough to easily start a fire. With a fire and a tent, he's set for a safe first night. Contestant number 2, Britt, makes his entrance. He's currently scouting the area for usable resources. But luck isn't as on his side as it was for Jim. The rugged, slippery terrain makes walking tough, let alone finding a flat spot for a shelter. He reminisces about the last time he was in the woods, walking a cat in the meadow with his adorable son. Britt, the strongest accountant in the wild and the most survival-savvy accountant out there. Now, it's his turn to show what he's got. After a long walk, he finally finds a flat area, scenic, near water, with natural green mattresses, but surrounded by tall trees which pose a risk from falling objects. So, he has to move on, hoping to find a better spot. Then, unexpectedly, he stumbles upon a skeleton, a cow's skull and its matching bones, with another jawbone from a different animal. Looks like Britt has wandered into cougar territory. His heart skips 3 beats as fear fills his eyes.
I hear a noise.
10 people surviving the wilderness, and the challenges have just begun. While searching for a campsite, Britt spots signs of a cougar and a pile of fresh wild boar droppings. Looking at the size of these droppings, you can guess how big that pig was. Britt starts to get nervous and begins to set up traps.
So, I just put a little simple slip knot on the end and made a loop. I'm gonna have it hanging head level, maybe a little bit lower.
Alright, that's sorted. Now I just wait for dinner. Then, he randomly picked a spot and threw together a little lean-to. It'll do for tonight. I need to report something. Someone's skinny dipping out there. That free-spirited lady is Callie. Skinny dipping is her unique way of blending into new surroundings. It helps deepen her connection with nature. Next to her is a tent she's half put up. Slow and steady wins the race. That's Callie's way of doing things. Now she's off to make a comfy chair, heading to the woods to chop some bamboo. Callie's been living solo in the countryside. She's in for the long haul, set on bagging that $500,000 prize. She's got real skills. Back on the shore, she's got the chair frame ready. Looks like a lounge chair. Callie's methodically whittling the bamboo, 1 piece at a time. After a busy afternoon, it's finally done. The chair legs look a bit thin, but they still support her well enough. Look at her. All she's missing is a fishing rod. But no rod, just fishing line. She throws the line into the water, then starts gathering firewood. All right, dare to trick me? I curse you to be sent away in the next episode. You've got to admit, this place is a real gem. Before she's even done talking, Callie's landed a fish. Cut to the fish already gutted. Let's see what's inside its stomach. A snail, a bit of twig, and a beetle. Callie uses that beetle as bait, and surprise, lands another decent-sized fish. Her luck's as good as last season's Nicole. I just hope she's watched my commentary and doesn't end up like Nicole. Come nightfall, Britt hears strange noises. After listening closely, he thinks it's his trap catching something. He gets up to check, knife in hand for safety, heart pounding all the way. The 3 fish Megan caught last
It's way up there.
can't see a thing. He's just too young and inexperienced. In this situation, I'd suggest it's wiser for him to stick by the campfire. This is Jim's second day here, and the weather's turned. A blizzard is on the way. He needs to hurry up and get his shelter built. He chopped down a few trees with his axe, set up a triangular frame, added about 5 or 6 logs for crossbeams, and finally covered it with a waterproof tarp. This design allows him to build a fire inside the tent, with smoke escaping through an opening at the top. Next, he made a bed out of bamboo, keeping himself off the ground. Not a bad day's work. Overnight passes, and by morning, he looks spaced out. I don't know what he went through last night, but he started talking nonsense.
Day three.
Then, he began to miss his wife and kids. From my experience, this is the rhythm of someone ready to quit. Sure enough, he went down to the river, pulled out a satellite phone.
I'm done. I tapped out.
Now, let's introduce our fourth contestant, Fowler. He might have OCD, shot the opening scene 5 times. His little shelter got soaked last night. Now he's looking to move uphill to a new campsite. The trees lying all over make it tough to get through, but he believes the view on the other side of the mountain will be worth it. While walking, Fowler spots wild boar droppings, and they aren't smaller than what Britt found. He looks around, nerves tightening. Fowler and his wife have a 4-year-old daughter and a little one over a year-old. They live in a yurt in the suburbs, no running water, and don't turn on the lights until it's dark. So every day is about survival for him. Building is the skill he's proudest of. There's nothing he can't make. The prize money could ease his family's struggles for a century. To reach that goal, no matter how tough, he won't give up. Back to the main story, Fowler finally finds a good spot. The fallen tree in front of him is perfect for a back wall, but the daily trek up and down the hill is a challenge. As he hesitated, he discovered some bones.
Could a puma take down a cow? If I move up here, I might be moving closer to his territory.
Looks like this place isn't suitable to live in anymore. Living next to cougars just isn't fun. Guess moving will have to wait. At night, Fowler goes down to the river to fish, aiming to catch 1 fish a day. Suddenly, he hears a strange noise. A pair of eyes watches him from the darkness. Then, they disappear in a blink. The $1 million survival challenge is on day 4, with 9 out of the 10 contestants remaining. This contestant is named Dave. He's showing off even without much muscle. Is that the confidence of sharing a name with last season's champ? Swimming is his every Saturday ritual. It makes him feel at home. Dave's been honing his wilderness survival skills for 20 years, with a record of surviving 44 days in the wild. He's pretty much an old pro at this. He's in this competition to level up his skills. This time, besides their 10 personal items, they got an extra toothbrush. Talk about being cheap. They didn't even provide toothpaste. Dave makes do with charcoal for brushing. He heads to the river looking for food, casts a line, and soon pulls up a fish. He carries his catch back, quickly cooks up a pot of delicious fish, and savors a piece, looking utterly blissful. Meanwhile, Britt's holding his toothbrush, lost in thought, probably wondering why they didn't give out toothpaste. After brushing, he starts his day's work, upgrading the roof to fix a water pooling issue. He saws down a tree for a crossbeam, then tops the beam with moss to prevent puncturing the tent. Here's Megan, the second female contestant this season, walking along the coastline when she accidentally steps into quicksand.
Oh my, I can't even get out.
Right now, she's truly stuck. She really struggled to get out. Her boots were so wet they were unrecognizable. Cold and damp, she reminisced about sunbathing with her family not long ago. And now, here she was getting battered by the elements. Megan is a park ranger and a biologist who's even faced off with bears. Loving a challenge, she kissed her family goodbye, hoping to find herself in the competition. She knows her plants well. The fruits of this particular white bead tree are packed with vitamins. If you come across this plant, pick as much as you can. What you can't eat fresh can be turned into syrup and jam. Right from the start, she began stockpiling food for the winter. I really think she's one to watch. This guy fishing over here is Greg.
Fish for breakfast!
Who's really skilled at killing fish. He threads his fingers through the gills, then twists the head off from the back, and the fish passes on peacefully. It doesn't take long before the fish is grilled. Greg, squatting on the ground, devours it eagerly, then suddenly hears a strange noise in the distance. He quickly drops the fish, grabs his bow and arrows to check it out. Unfortunately, he finds nothing. With no outlet for his energy, he ends up shooting an arrow at a stump just to show off his impressive shooting skills. Greg is from a small town near Los Angeles, where he learned fishing and hunting as a kid. He has 37 years of carpentry experience and is really handy with an axe. He also learned from the locals how to boil water with stones. To maintain his image on camera, he even made a comb to manage his hair and cleaned up his nose hairs with a burnt stick. He says it's the jungle's own way of shaving. His daughter Janet is his only family and his motivation to compete. This is Greg's base camp, close to food, firewood, and water. Truly blessed with the essentials, he peels some moss, dries it, and lays it on planks to make a single bed. Though it looks like a stretcher, it's actually quite comfortable. Before dawn breaks, Zach is woken up by bird calls. He thought he'd escape alarm clocks here, but instead encountered a male bird in heat. Barely making it to daylight, he quickly gets up and collects some bamboo. He's going to make a fishing trap.
And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to make an M. And in the middle of the M, I'm going to leave it partially open so the fish can...
After explaining the principles, he skillfully started making the trap, knocking bamboo sticks into the water one by one. Imagine, fish swimming in here and getting trapped. Then he covered the trap with leaves, perfectly camouflaging it. Job done. After finishing, he felt a bit spaced out and started missing his girlfriend. As he walked, he found some droppings on the ground, picked up a piece, and examined it closely. It contained bones and hair, signaling he was in cougar territory. Zach looked around nervously, half expecting a big cat to leap down from the trees. 6 days into the Wilderness Survival Challenge, Zach had been hungry for a week without a bite to eat. He checked his fishing gear again, still empty, and dejectedly sat down on the ground, thinking about quitting. But ultimately, he picked up his axe and continued improving his shelter. It was a long trek to find a bamboo grove, and cutting and carrying the bamboo was no easy task, especially on the root-entangled mountain paths where a misstep could mean a nasty fall. After hauling back and forth for 2 hours, Zach's face and neck were chafed raw. He was about to swear but remembered he was being filmed, so he clenched his teeth and forced a smile. By contrast, Megan's smile was genuinely heartfelt. Let's check out her dinner. She gathered orange lichen and charo fruit, planning to brew a pot of health tea. True to her botanist roots, but she knew it wouldn't be enough to live on, so she decided to build a fishing device. She cut a branch to make 2 triggers, tied one end of a fishing line to a bent sapling, and set up the trigger device. Once a fish bites, it would pull the line and set off the trap, achieving automatic fishing. It looked ingeniously designed, but it was uncertain how effective it would be. Meanwhile, Zach was inside listening to the rain. It was his 8th day here, and the rainy weather always made him feel more downhearted. He was already contemplating quitting. To shake off the thought, he decided to get busy. Today, he was going to make a fire reflector.
I'm going to do one here, and then another one over here. And then once I get more bamboo, I just slide them in along that and stack, stack, stack. And then I'm going to tie off at the base up here. So then it'll be a wall of bamboo all the way up, and then hopefully it'll block some of the wind pushing smoke in, and it'll reflect heat back in towards my shelter.
That's a great idea, but it requires a lot of bamboo. Zach had no choice but to hit that root-filled path again. The recent rain made it even tougher to navigate. As he chopped away the obstructive branches, he started to lose his cool again. They say getting angry can mess things up, and sure enough, he suddenly tripped.
Cut myself.
Stumbling, he ran back to the camp to tend to his wound. Then he found a spot with a strong signal and pressed the satellite phone button.
I cut my arm. It just won't stop.
Meanwhile, Greg was plotting to catch a wild boar.
I'm gonna go to one tree. I'm gonna go to another tree on the other side of the trail. Like that, and then that will go to that tree. Take some fish guts, hang it from a line, and when they go for that, they might get...
Once his plan was set, he took off. In the dense forest, Greg mumbled to himself as he walked and quickly lost his way. After wandering around for ages, he still couldn't figure out where he was. Come morning, Britt mimicked his son's dance that he'd performed at his wedding. Switching scenes, he headed to the river to process the fish he'd caught. He chopped up the innards and scattered them in the surrounding waters as excellent bait. Then he cast his fishing line into the river. Sure enough, he soon caught a fish, then a second and a third neatly lined up. Then, swiftly, he chopped off the fish heads. He hadn't even finished the 3 fish from the day when he caught another one at night. While others worried about finding food, he had to figure out how to keep his fresh. Luckily, he found a small water channel, placed the extra fish there, and made a bamboo fence to keep other animals from stealing them. He covered it with a large stone, securing the cool, fresh storage. He proudly sang, feeling like he had already won. Survival in the wild depended on either good luck or a good attitude. Like this lady, who could make even plain boiling water taste like a fish soup. After drinking her water, Callie started building a shelter. She first set up a large triangular frame, then added a smaller one next to it, connecting them with bamboo poles. She topped it off with a waterproof sheet. Perfect. To withstand the storms, she added many posts along the beam and filled them with bamboo leaves. Simple, stylish, and environmentally friendly. This guy without a shirt? That's Dan. He dived into the water and in no time caught himself a fish. He's the 9th contestant this season. As a full-time forest dweller, setting traps is just a walk in the park for him. Check out his trophies, rows of art pieces and animal specimens. They're worth a pretty penny, but he's too attached to sell any of them. That's why he's itching to snag that $500,000 prize. He left his wife and son to come here. Lately, he hasn't snagged any game, just surviving on water. Hungry Dan headed to the river where his fishing line from last night seemed to have caught something. Upon closer inspection, he found the lines tangled, so he stripped down and jumped in to retrieve the fish. When he surfaced, he had a fish in hand. Dan quickly processed the fish, and soon, he was munching on some steaming hot fish meat, filling his belly and boosting his morale. The weather started to cool down, so Callie decided to build a fireplace for warmth. She hauled a bunch of rocks from the river. Initially shivering, she soon found herself overheating as she piled up the stones. The fireplace was indeed very cozy. She gathered lots of bamboo to seal the gaps. Cut to a new day, and Callie was happily dancing in front of her cabin, celebrating the perfect completion of her shelter. Check out her wilderness mansion, white and green exterior, a fireplace made of rocks, a simple eco-friendly clothes rack, a soft double bed, and a solid wood shelving unit. It's fresh, natural, and seamlessly integrated. Tonight marks Callie's housewarming. She moved some charcoal into the fireplace, instantly making the new place feel like home. In contrast, another girl, Megan, had it rough. She stayed alone in a simple tent, constantly adding wood to the fire to mask her scent. After saying goodnight, Megan couldn't sleep, feeling paranoid and peering around, always sensing something lurking outside. Barely making it through the night, Megan finally relieved herself at dawn. On her way back, she stumbled upon some fresh, wild boar dung, less than 10 meters from her shelter. Safety became an urgent issue. She gathered lots of branches and enclosed her shelter, placing a big X at the entrance as if to say, "Keep out. I get it, but I wonder if the wild boar will." Fowler is definitely the top road builder in wilderness survival. To avoid repeating Zach's mistakes, he decided to build a road for easier access up and down the mountain.
And you step on that bamboo as you're going downhill, you might as well step on a slip and slide. It's a little on the dangerous side.
Here's how you'd stick some bamboo into the ground, then weave more bamboo horizontally to make a fence. Once you clear the weeds off the ground, you've got yourself a pretty decent path. Could this path be his winning road? The last one to show up this season is the stunning Carly. She's been busy building her shelter these past few days, trying to mimic a bird's nest. She's from Alaska, a female architect. Building houses and weaving baskets are her thing. This beautiful backpack and the hat on her head, she made them herself. she always wants to use her skills in the wild. Her latest adventure was hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, crossing Washington State. After breaking up with her ex, she found herself here. Today, Carly kept on working on her bird's nest. Just when I doubted the stability of a beam, she did a quick pull-up test to show it was all good. Then she chopped more branches, made a cone-shaped roof, weaving it layer by layer with thin branches. And finally, she covered it with leaves for insulation and warmth.
My walls are strong. Strong enough to climb on.
This failure hit her hard. Seeing her crying and upset, I wonder if she can last much longer in the competition. Fowler, drained from building roads, headed to the river to check his fishing nets. As he walked, he noticed the mountain blocking the sunlight. No wonder he's been feeling down lately. It was the lack of the sunshine of love. Realizing this almost brought him to tears. Chasing after the sun, he made it to the other side of the mountain. Fowler's face was like a sunflower, tears streaming down in the sunlight.
It feels good.
Here we are, day 17 of the Wilderness Survival Challenge. Has Megan lost it? She's holding a big machete. Looks like she's about to do something drastic. Hold on, she's just shaving her legs. After being a vegetarian for 17 days, today she's ready to eat some meat. She heads to the river to check her fishing traps. Her trap did catch a fish, but unfortunately, she yanked the fishing line too hard and it snapped. Megan had no choice but to dive in after it. Braving the cold, she plunged in and ended up crying her way back to shore without the fish.
I lost it. So upset right now.
Megan hurried back to camp, changed her clothes, and warmed up by the fire to avoid catching a cold. Once settled, she couldn't stop thinking about that big fish that got away. Feelings of defeat mixed with loneliness made the night even colder. In the morning, Fowler was practicing his shooting skills, hoping to bag some birds or ducks later on. But after 18 tries, he only hit the target once. Looks like his aim needs work. With no sun in sight and nothing in his pot, he set his sights on a duck at the lake. He tiptoed over, aimed at a duck's head, and shot a stone. Fowler was about to swim over to retrieve it when the duck popped its head up as if to say, "Just kidding, try catching me for another 18 years. Mocked by a duck, he couldn't stand the humiliation. If one plan fails, try another. He decided to build a duck trap and go all out against the ducks. Fowler found a wooden board, sawed a triangular notch into it, and fixed up 2 small boards into a propeller. He then used rubber bands to attach it to the notch, using the rotating force to propel a small boat forward. Next, he chopped some wooden stakes and planted them in the river. After all that work, he actually managed to build a dock, true to his shipbuilder roots, covering all bases.
So, this is what we got going on. As you can see, the propulsion to take it out there. A rock with a line tied to it, 2 of these, and a line to a fish hook in a fish head, which I'm hoping the ducks will take, and which they're apt to do. And then they will tug on it, which will pull the rock off of here because they'll want to get away, and it'll pull it into the water, and the rock will unravel, and it'll pull their heads under and finish them off.
Once everything was set, all Fowler had to do was go home, boil some water, and wait for the ducks to fall for the trap. Hearing a noise in the water, Fowler rushed to the shore only to find the duck trap had flipped over, but there were no ducks on it. This left him feeling pretty down.
It looks like there's a fish tied to the side of it somehow, or something going on.
He quickly gathered up his gear after landing a hefty 22-pound rainbow trout. Fowler gave the fish a loving kiss before sending his little boat of hope out again and secured some food. Everything seemed more beautiful with his newfound catch. Greg appeared, clutching a handful of grass. It had been a while since he had caught any game. To stave off starvation, he decided to make a soup out of the grass. Just after he finished the soup, he nearly threw up. Greg hadn't caught any fish for days and was pinning his hopes on a wild boar trap he had set the previous week. When he checked, The trap was destroyed, and even the bait was gone. What kind of cunning animal could do this? Luckily, he had installed a camera to keep an eye on things. Under the cover of moonlight, a creature that looked part fox, part wolf, snatched the bait and ignored the trap. Back at camp, Greg resolved to figure out a way to deal with this little thief. Britt spoke into the camera, mentioning he was having a tough time adjusting to the local environment, and his kidneys weren't doing great, causing him to get up at night. So he made a simple urinal out of a piece of hollow wood, which worked pretty well. Although usually upbeat, Britt hadn't been able to smile much lately. It had been 8 days without catching any fish, and he had been surviving on grass, having almost cleared the nearby field. Today, he finally found some plantain and beefsteak mushrooms in the hills. Desperate with hunger, he gobbled them up. Constantly eating grass was taking its toll, so he decided it was time to hunt for some meat and set up a bungee trap in the bushes after spotting rabbit tracks, hoping for a good catch. Dave hadn't been seen for a while, but his smile said it all. There was a fish on his cutting board and fish head soup simmering in the pot. He had the fire blazing and had even made a cozy bed. Today, he was making a door for his small shack. First, he constructed 2 triangular door frames from thick bamboo and filled in the middle with finer bamboo. He described it as a sandwich cookie that would better retain heat. After a half-day's work, a semi-automatic door was ready. He installed it to see the effect, clearly enjoying himself thoroughly. In the early morning, Megan went to the riverbank to check her fishing trap but found the fish stuck in the reeds. She had no choice but to go into the river to catch them.
I got a fish. Woohoo!
Before you know it, a steaming pot of fish soup is ready. Megan scarfs down a whole fish in no time. Meanwhile, Greg is still stewing over a fox that stole his bait, which really messed with his boar trapping efforts. He's determined to catch that pesky fox. Greg drags over a thick log and sets up branches on either side to form a V shape.
The idea of the stakes, he has to come in to get at the bait. So I'll run a V this way, a V that way, and just make my row of stakes.
All set for the fox to fall for it. The next day, Greg checks the trap only to find the bait stolen again. It seems the fox has mastered the art, almost like it's raiding its own kitchen. This drives Greg nuts. He's forced to tweak his trap again, this time making a more sensitive mechanism. Surely it'll work now. Night falls, and the fox, knowing the drill, visits again. The same tragedy unfolds. What was supposed to be a trap seems more like feeding time. This totally enrages Greg. Watching the fox's skilled moves, Greg knows he's been outsmarted. A terrible feeling looms over him as hunger and defeat make him want to head home. But remembering his promise to build a house for his daughter, he calms himself down. It's day 34. Britt is mumbling in his cabin, feeling like a remote-controlled car that's lost its batteries, completely out of juice. It's been days without protein, and he's physically drained, wobbling around. Now, he's off to check his traps, hoping to catch a rabbit, his last hope. Climbing the hill with hope, Britt finds his trap made of fishing line has been chewed through by a rabbit. He starts questioning his smarts. His last straw didn't pan out, and homesickness floods back. After wandering aimlessly all day, he returns to his cabin, pulls out his son's photo, and firms up his decision to head home.
This is Britt.
Okay, mate.
I think I'm ready for you guys to come pick me up.
Another one bites the dust, leaving 7 challengers. Lately, Greg has been plagued by the fox and is feeling pretty down. He's just staring blankly at the trap, muttering about his boar and his meat. Driven by hunger, he finally ditches the unreliable trap and heads to the river to look for fish. Squinting, he scans for fish in the river and decides to build a raft to fish in waters across from him. He finds a suitable tree, saws out 2 notches, inserts a couple of sticks, and lays some planks across them. With a splash, he pushes it into the water and climbs aboard. I thought this was going to be a huge project, but it was done so quickly. Greg really didn't have time to waste. If he waited any longer, he might starve. but his makeshift boat is wobbly and doesn't get far before he has to head back urgently. After that trip, Greg's shoes were so wet he could have raised fish in them. Looks like his fishing plans are on hold for now. Let's check in on Carly. She's fixed up her roof. Learning from before, the new house looks pretty solid. At night, she's by the fire, staring up at the sky, reminded of stargazing with her boyfriend, feeling deeply lonely. Some animal nearby must have sensed her solitude, wanting to keep her company. Hearing a noise, Carly quickly stood up, scanning around, but there was nothing in sight. But I just don't get it in such a dangerous place. Why she'd camp out instead of staying in her house. After Greg's first failed attempt at sailing, not one to give up, he found another log and started working on it, believing as long as he could get out on the water, he'd definitely catch some fish. With the last log slotted in, his new raft was ready. This time, it looked a lot more reliable.
We made our maiden voyage in the Titanic. We didn't hit no icebergs, so...
He went to a fishing spot, and no sooner had he dropped his line than he caught a big fish. Meanwhile, Dan dreamt he was sneaking cupcakes in a mall and got chased by security, waking him up in a fright. After getting up, he went to the river and cast a line, soon catching a fish. Keeping an optimistic outlook and managing his energy well, he believes, are his keys to winning. Sometimes he's too lazy to turn on the camera, so there's not much footage of him. These days, Dave's lost more weight, wobbling to the river to fish, the surface starting to ice over, and the fish have moved away from the shore, so he hasn't caught any in recent weeks. He's resorted to eating grass to stave off hunger. There are no signs of rabbits around his camp, and the only thing he can catch is mice. But due to the risk of hantavirus, the show's crew has banned catching rodents. Desperate, Dave ends up screaming in frustration. After calming down, he pulls out his secret weapon, something called the fly, supposedly a fishing miracle. After releasing one, all that's left is the long wait. His 50th birthday is coming up soon. Will he get a birthday gift from above? 2 hours later, he finally caught a fish. Dave couldn't wait to slice open the belly, pull out the roe, and stuff it in his mouth. Delicious enough to make him suck his fingers. Compared to Dave, Fowler is so much more adorable. This morning he had a bowl of delicious fish head soup that really kick-started his day. He's been here for 35 days now, still living in a basic tent, which, honestly, is kind of hard to justify, especially with snow on the horizon. He really needs to speed things up. Actually, he started building a shelter 14 days ago. Look at this massive project. He must have chopped down almost every bamboo on this mountain. This is how he weaved such a tight double-layered wicker wall, stuffing bamboo leaves in the middle for excellent insulation. With this wall, he's not worried about wind or rain anymore, but it's really labor-intensive. After working for a bit, he got hungry again. A flipped piece of turf caught his attention, and he guessed it was the work of a wild boar, and the soil on top was still moist. Looks like the boar had just left. Fowler got excited. Catching a big wild boar could practically guarantee him the win. No sooner said than done. He started digging a hole, praising his entrenching tool for being so effective. He quickly finished a big pit, placed sharpened bamboo sticks inside, covered them with bamboo leaves, and topped it off with a thin layer of soil.
Just being a pig. I don't want to go that way. Oh, here's a log. I jump over the log. Boom.
To make sure he'd get that pork, one trap wouldn't be enough. He set up another one not too far away, inserting 2 bamboo sticks and tying a rope between them.
A nice sharp spike.
Then winding it tight. Fowler demonstrated how this trap works. Place the bait at the split bamboo sticks. If a wild boar comes for the bait, the sticks will snap apart.
That split stick falls apart. Spike comes around. And
planting hope and waiting for the harvest. Today, Callie's luxury single room got a new addition, a rack specially for storing firewood and a wind chime to relax the mind and body. She's finding her own rhythm of life. Today, she's planning to build a steam room. I really want to advise her against it. Previous contestants who tried steaming and bathing didn't last long in this show, but she wouldn't listen. Swiftly, she chopped some bamboo and quickly erected a dome. She then took off the tarp from her shelter and laid it over the steam room, fitting perfectly. Inside, she left a small space for storing stones and laid a green carpet at the entrance. It takes 4 hours to heat the stones. During the wait, Callie missed her mom a bit. Once everything was ready, she crawled into the steam room. Not sure what she thought about in there, but when she came out, she said,
I was up all night last night contemplating this, and I've just decided that my journey here is...
"What did I tell you? Steaming is toxic. Whoever steams, leaves."
Hello? Hi. Yeah, it's me. Yeah. Yeah, get me the president. Yes, of the United States. I don't care if they're in a meeting. This is an emergency. Thanks. Mr. President, it's go time. Blah! Got you. It's not even on.
All right, dare to trick me? I curse you to be sent away in the next episode. Let's check out Fowler's trap. No catch, and the bait was stolen. He rebaited it and decided to try again. Back at his shelter, he didn't stop working for a second, first upgrading the outer walls, then making a broom to sweep. As he kept busy, it gradually got darker. Inside, Fowler carved a small rabbit from a root as a gift for his daughter. The next day, he continued to struggle with his shelter, but the workload was becoming overwhelming. He started to ponder whether to give up. Meanwhile, Dan was feeling down. Even though he's a hunter, he felt useless because he forgot to bring tools for setting traps, which made him doubt his abilities. After hesitating, he took a saw and went up the mountain. At the same moment, Dave looked worried, listlessly carving wood and rambling to the camera to ease his loneliness. He looked much thinner than a few days ago. When the sun came up, he started a new fishing trip. Today, his luck was exceptionally good. He caught a fish right after casting his line. Muttering, "Thank you," he expertly stabbed the knife into the fish's head. He quickly took out his favorite part, the milt, and gently sucked it into his mouth, his face showing pure enjoyment. Back at camp, Dave built a fish drying rack, then divided the fish into portions, 1 piece for eating today and the other 2 for drying. He figured 1 piece could last 3 days, enough to sustain him for 6 months. "All I can say is, my cat eats more than that. Are you sure this plan will work?" Meanwhile, Callie mysteriously said she cooked something special. Lifting the lid,
Sock soup.
she joked, seemingly not hungry at all. After boiling her socks, she took them to the river for a thorough disinfecting rinse. Suddenly, Callie took off her pants, not to wash them, but because she discovered 3 deep spider bites on her leg. This was serious. If not treated promptly, the bites could quickly become infected. Thankfully, Callie is a herbalist. She gathered some plantain with anti-inflammatory properties and some antibacterial pine moss. She crushed these herbs together to make an ointment for the wounds. After cleaning the bites, she placed the ointment on a mesh pad and applied it to the wounds. After this simple treatment, she hoped to see signs of healing by the morning. The next morning, she took off her pants again to check the bites. They did look better. She decided to wrap the wounds with a bandage and continue the challenge, never giving up. Greg went to the river to check his fishing line.
I got a fish on there. Okay, I don't want to lose.
To retrieve a fish tangled in the reeds, he braved the cold water and went in. Just as he grabbed the fish, he slipped and fell. Shivering, he hurried back to the shelter, couldn't wait to stretch his feet toward the fire, and peeled off his drenched clothes. His hands and feet were freezing, and it seemed like even his stomach was starting to hurt. Lately, Greg had been really worried about firewood since getting it had become a major hassle for him. After some rest, he decided to start chopping this log, but got tired pretty quickly. Day in and day out, chopping and hauling wood became his routine. At 53, his body was starting to feel the strain. To make getting firewood easier, he decided to move his home closer to the river. Although he was quite pleased with himself for finding a bunch of firewood, he seemed to overlook one major issue. High tide could flood his shelter. That evening, he realized things were looking bad. The lake's water level was nearing his bed, rising a few inches every half hour. Plus, it was raining, making things even worse. He shivered, quickly crawled into his sleeping bag, and could only pray he'd make it through this tough night. Since Callie was bitten by a spider, she couldn't go into the water to fish and was feeling a bit bored. To pass the time and soothe her mind, she decided to make her own musical instrument. She took a piece of wood, hollowed out one end, then used charcoal to flatten the bottom of the wood, completing the first part. Next, she carved a few small holes in the wood, installed some tuning pegs, and used fishing line for strings. A ukulele seemed to be taking shape. Beautiful music began to echo through the wilderness as she started playing and singing by herself. By evening, Callie's condition seemed to worsen. Her glands were inflamed, and she even started to feel nauseous and dry heave. Although she was determined to stay, whether she could stick it out depended on if her body could handle it. In this difficult time, let's all pray for her speedy recovery. She didn't wake up until the next afternoon, clearly not feeling well, showing that the virus had invaded her body. Callie felt like she might not make it through the night. Before considering quitting, she decided to take one last look at this place she didn't want to leave. Her physical condition forced her to make this decision. The challenge tests not only survival skills, but also facing loneliness, illness, accidents, and threats from wild animals. Was it really time to say goodbye? Dan caught his first fish today and immediately grilled it when he got back to camp. His grilling skills, which he had learned from locals, were top-notch. Tasting the fish he cooked not only delighted his taste buds, but also brought back memories of home. He remembered the unique scent of fish his mom used to cook, a scent from his childhood memories. Overwhelmed with nostalgia, he couldn't help but wonder what his son was doing right now and if he was missing him too. Carly caught 2 worms and excitedly headed to the river. She had lost quite a bit of weight lately and desperately needed protein, but it seemed like she had no luck with the fish here. On day 28, she tried fishing, using stones to build a weir, hoping to trap some fish. By day 36, she had woven a basket and made a fishing trap. However, none of these efforts brought any catch. Today, she finally saw a fish, but it managed to slip off the hook and escape. Unable to bear this string of setbacks, she finally sat by the river and started crying. After all, she was still just a young girl, and it was heartbreaking to see her like this. Unable to catch any food, Carly had no choice but to lie down near the fire to keep warm, her heart as still as dead water. She had already decided to give up fishing, but just when she felt all was lost, she suddenly heard a noise in the river. She immediately grabbed her fishing rod and ran to the riverbank. Soon she was crying again, but this time out of joy. She had finally caught a fish after waiting for so long. As she prepared the fish with tears of excitement streaming down her face, it wasn't long before she began to enjoy this hard-earned meal. In the middle of the night, it made me hungry just watching her. Looking at Dan's expression, you could describe him as lifeless. He hadn't spoken to anyone in over 50 days, and the solitude had turned him exceptionally quiet. Sitting by the fire, hugging his knees, he seemed lost in his thoughts. It looked like he had decided to end this experience. After shifting in his seat countless times, he abruptly stood up. I guessed he was going to get his phone from the room. Sure enough, the crew showed up shortly after.
It's done. I'm tapping out.
Dan said he wanted to go home to fulfill his duties as a husband and father. He might have wanted the $500,000 prize, but he wanted to be a good husband and father even more. Halfway through the Wilderness Survival Challenge, 6 contestants remained. Fowler, aiming a slingshot at a chubby bird perched in a tree, took a shot. His shooting skills weren't great. He only managed to startle the bird, which flew away unharmed. Recently, he had finally finished his new shelter, clean, tidy, and warm. A simple rack neatly held chopsticks, a blower, a small shovel, and a sponge. Hanging from the bamboo next to it were his remaining food supplies, 2 fish heads and half a fish. Clearly, it wasn't enough. So today, Fowler decided to catch a bird to eat. Knowing his limited shooting skills, he gave up on using the slingshot to hunt birds, and instead planned to make a bird trap. It looked nice, but it was unclear if it would work. He hung a small piece of fish guts in the trap and waited for a miracle.
There he goes. He's in the trap. He just ate the grub and out of the trap.
Greg was feeding foxes, and Fowler was feeding birds. The contestants this season seemed quite compassionate. Speaking of Greg, he nearly burst into tears. Rising lake waters had flooded his sleeping bag, forcing him out of his warm bed. Rain fell from the sky, and his mood was as heavy as if his heart were bleeding. A faint flame was his only support. He just hoped for the rain to stop so his clothes and sleeping bag could dry. But by dawn, the sky was still overcast and rainy. The persistent cold finally broke him. Now, standing made him dizzy, and sitting made him feel weak. The cold was almost hallucinatory. After all, at 53, such hardships made him feel like his bones were falling apart. He finally made the call. Although he wouldn't win the prize money, he decided to go home and build a house for his daughter himself. Despite his age, he figured he could still handle painting a house. Such is the heart of a parent. After getting bitten by a spider, Callie kept pushing through, which I really admire. She whipped up some herbal ointment and kept treating the bite on her thigh. After applying the ointment, she even had a cup of truffle tea to speed up her healing from the inside out. She hoped to see some improvement in her wound after getting some sleep. The next day, when Callie checked the wound, she found it had scabbed over and wasn't hurting anymore. She was so glad she hadn't quit the competition. Like the saying goes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Maybe this setback will bring her some good luck down the line. Fowler woke up early in the morning and started sweeping his campsite clean. After tidying up, he glanced over and saw that chubby bird hanging around again. Feeling a bit cheeky, he went to check his bird trap again.
Oh, look who finally got himself caught.
He quickly took off his vest, used it to cover the trap, and carefully reached in to grab the hard-earned catch. After he got the bird out, he quickly broke its neck, sending it off peacefully. Then Fowler got to work on the bird, swiftly plucking the feathers and removing the innards. Before long, he had a pot of delicious bird soup cooking. He took a taste. It was amazing. After filling up, he suddenly felt a strong longing for home. Out in the jungle, Carly spotted a deer staring right at her, and she got super excited, seeing nothing but venison. She fantasized about being the deer king of the season. But deep down, she knew she wasn't on Roland's level. She sighed, curbed her greedy urge, and focused on something more pressing, fixing her gloves. She scraped some twigs and ash off a spruce tree, mixed them into tar paste, and added some rough edges to enhance the repair. Just like that, her gloves were as good as new.
Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me.
Today was Carly's birthday, and though she wasn't exactly happy without a cake, she at least wanted to fill her stomach. She grabbed a handful of dandelions from the ground to curb her cravings. Then, she found some nettle with antibacterial properties and decided to make a pot of vegetable soup. Even without cake, Carly still felt grateful. She said, "The difference between surviving and living is all in the mindset. Living is about enjoying each day, while surviving is about getting through each day." She hoped to not just survive here, but to truly live. Lately, Megan had been disturbed by a fox that kept lurking around, worrying her about the threat of rabies. This kept her up at night. Since she couldn't sleep, she decided to get up and move around, going down to the river to check on the plants she'd planted, only to find they'd been damaged by frost. Feeling hungry, she started considering catching the fox. After all, not only would its meat be a good source of food, but its fur could keep her warm on the cold nights. With that thought, she immediately started setting up a snare.
I fenced in this whole area so the animal is encouraged to funnel over to the side. Then there is a noose tied to the sapling, which comes on down, is propped up, is about the right size for a fox head, about the right height. And there's a trigger line running back from the sapling over to the top peg with some bait. So that is my trigger noose system for fox.
After setting everything up, she just had to wait patiently for the fox to fall into the trap. Callie's luck really hasn't been great lately. She just got over a spider bite, and now she's having issues with a mouse. I'm really worried she might get bitten again. After all, you can't treat hantavirus with herbs. So she decided to take matters into her own hands and deal with the mouse problem for good.
It's a little figure 4 trap. So Mousy comes along, yummy, bam, hopefully smashes it.
At night, she heard the sound of the trap going off, so she went out to check, lifted a stone, and sure enough, there was a mouse underneath. Considering the mouse might be carrying the hantavirus, she found herself torn. To eat or not to eat? Dave has aged quite a bit recently. Even his beard has several white hairs now. He joked that it makes him look like a wise man. After brewing a pot of tea, he decided to check on his boar trap. The trap hadn't been sprung, but he found some signs of boar nearby. So he brought some bamboo to camouflage himself and prepared to surprise the boar from hiding. After who knows how long, he finally heard some animal noises. Dave rushed out excitedly, but the boar was already gone. A camera that had fallen to the ground captured footage of the boar.
They're freaking mocking me. They're like, this guy's an idiot.
He managed a strained smile for the camera and decided to reset the trap, determined to have some pork. A few hours later,
All right, 2 traps set for bear.
I still felt it wasn't reliable. While waiting for the fox to deliver itself, Megan wasn't idle. She went down to the river and cast a fishing line. Turning around, she spotted fox droppings, as if reminding Megan that this was its territory. She hurried to check her snare trap and found it had been tampered with. The fox was yelling from not too far away, "Come catch me!" Megan chased after it, but the fox quickly disappeared. Without any catch, Megan had to settle for eating some grass to stave off hunger. At night, she found fox claw marks on her fuel pile, suggesting the fox was desperate and might charge in to bite her at any moment. Megan tapped on her tent, hoping to scare the fox away. Tonight was destined to be another sleepless night. She started considering whether she should leave or not. The 10-person wilderness survival challenge has been going on for 65 days, and only 5 contestants remain. Carly, thrilled to find a flock of white geese in the reeds, quickly gathered a few ropes and some stones to make a couple of slingshots. She tiptoed towards the flock of geese, but they spotted her. Now she had to switch her focus to fishing instead. Dave woke up hungry again. Every time I see him, he looks thinner than before. Since arriving in the wilderness, he's lost 36 kilos. Even joining The Biggest Loser might not have had this effect. After checking his health, he pulled out his bow and arrow. If he didn't find food soon, he'd waste away to nothing. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't draw the bow. It had a 60 kilograms draw weight, way too much for his weakened state. In the end, he had to pin his hopes on fishing. He cast a line by the shore, then went back to lie in his sleeping bag. Without food, he had to conserve as much energy as possible. Since day 55, he'd been cutting back his food intake, from 1 fish per meal to 1 slice of fish, and eventually 1 slice every 3 days. Now he could make a single fish last 6 days. Like that, he'd saved up 33 slices of fish, making him feel secure. According to his plan, eating every other day, his rations could last 2 months. Now, Dave pulled out some herbs and brewed a pot of tea. He said he wanted to eat healthier, but losing too much weight might get him kicked off the show. If he didn't maintain his weight, he'd be persuaded to leave at the next medical checkup. Fowler welcomed the first snowfall of the year. Seeing the fresh, new world, he was as happy as a child. Every year at this time, he used to build snowmen with his daughter. Now it was just him. He put a fishmouth hat on the snowman and attached 2 arms. Then he took out his slingshot and aimed at the snowman, hitting it right on the nose. Too bad he didn't have such good luck when hunting. The snowy scenery lifted Callie's spirits. The forest in the snow was like something out of a fairy tale. She flitted about like an elf. After having her fun, it was time to find something to eat. She went to the river and caught the first fish of the winter. She skillfully killed the fish with a stone, then placed it on a cutting board to process. Looking at the neatly arranged slices of fresh fish on the board made me want to reach through the screen and taste it. Switching scenes, Callie, well-fed and watered, was already strolling by the river. As night fell, she sat by the campfire, singing her heart out.
Patagonia's been calling me back to my home.
More than 70 days into the challenge, loneliness proved to be a bigger enemy than hunger. Fowler carved everything happening around him onto a stick to keep the boredom at bay. With no foxes to disturb her, Megan finally got a good night's sleep. Today was her son's 6th birthday, the first she couldn't spend with him, and the old mother shed bitter tears, vowing to make it up to him when she returned. She went to check her fishing line by the river, but came up empty-handed again, so she turned her attention to catching birds.
Okay. So there's one side of the box.
After constructing 4 sides and a lid, her bird trap was ready. She used some berries as bait, sprinkling them along the path to the trap and also inside the box. Once the trap was set up, Megan's bird trap was complete. Feeling down, Megan squatted on the ground eating grass. She hadn't caught any fish lately and was out of mushrooms, so she pinned her hopes on the bird trap.
And something triggered it, but managed to get out.
Undeterred, Megan went up the hill to check her rabbit traps, but only found a tuft of fur. Her luck was horribly bad. She kept chewing on grass roots to trick her brain into thinking she was eating. Frustrated with her empty fishing net, Megan dismantled it to make a scoop net, planning to catch fish directly from the water.
Oh my God, I got him.
She couldn't wait to clean the fish and start cooking. As she waited, I could almost see her drooling. Fowler might be the only one left with the energy to exercise. His once plump body had slimmed down considerably. Today, his task was to gather firewood, but it didn't take long before he started missing home.
But when you're out here by yourself, you think about family and how much they mean to you.
While others were barely surviving on scraps, she had just had a full meal and now wanted to go home. Callie pulled out a satellite phone by the shore, saying she'd realized the true meaning of life and saw no need to stay. Although I felt sad, I still wished this tough, brave challenger well. The $1 Million Survival Challenge has been going on for 73 days now, and out of the 10 contestants, only 4 are left. Megan is off to check her fishing traps today. When she gets to the river, the traps don't disappoint. She scores a fish.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh my goodness, a fish.
As she's dealing with the first catch, another fish slams into her trap. And it doesn't stop there. Soon another one gets caught too. Just like that, she's got 3 fish, something she wouldn't even dare to dream of, and today it's actually happened. Ecstatic, she heads back to camp. Suddenly, the crew shows up for a routine checkup. Megan now weighs 48 kilograms, having lost 18 kilograms since arriving. The doctor takes her blood pressure and listens to her heartbeats. Turns out, she's still hitting the health targets. After the crew leaves, Megan happily digs into her fish, life seeming hopeful once again. To distract herself from missing her family, Carly keeps herself busy. She chops a stump and assembles a circular frame, then pulls out a piece of cowhide she found a few days ago in the wild. She washes, wrings, and cuts the hide into a circle. She's making a drum. Using a cow leg bone, she drills holes in the drum head and ties it tight with a rope. With the drum finished, Carly spends her evening by the fire, drumming away. With this drum for company, maybe she can keep going a bit longer. Dave looks like he's straight out of a beggar's guild, dizzy from hunger. After a while, he manages to gather his wits and steps outside to bask in the sun, feeling rejuvenated. The 33 slices of smoked meat are his lifeline. With this solid backup, he can keep pushing forward, even thinking about taking some fish home. With these thoughts, he heads to the river, but he's so weak he can't even cast his line properly. After wading aimlessly without catching anything, he stumbles over the rocky riverbank, trying to find a better spot. The pain is so intense, I can feel it through the screen. It takes him a long time to get back up, and he returns to his cabin, finally taking out his precious fish slices to cook. Soon, a steaming bowl of fish soup is ready, and after a bowl, he finally feels a bit better. Today, he also has his routine checkup. He now weighs 54 kilograms, having lost a whopping 38 kilograms since the start. His blood pressure is way below normal. The doctor lifts his shirt, shocked by his emaciated frame. Obviously, the checkup results aren't good.
So his body is going to starvation, so he should go.
Facing Dave's pleas, the medical team still turned him down. Dave finally broke down in tears and left with his 33 fish. Planning is good, but everything has its limits. His poor dietary plan had already set him up for an early exit. Hopefully, he can go home, recover, and come back next season to try again. This might just be Fowler's worst day. Right now, he's by the river, blowing in the cold wind because he forgot to bring his fire starter and doesn't have the strength to go back and get it. He just squats down trying to start a fire. After a long struggle, he still can't get it lit. At this stage, being tired and hungry, every little setback seems huge. Thankfully, when one door closes, another opens. He goes to the dock to fish and quickly hooks a big one. Just as he's about to reel it in and head home, God suddenly closes that window too, leaving poor Fowler stunned in place. The bad day has left Fowler sleepless. He hopes for better luck today. He's never been this hungry. After clearing his traps, he's so desperate he even thinks about eating the grass in his hand. Might as well try fishing again. When he gets to the river, he's shocked. The dock is half submerged. He manages to drop a line and then turns to chop down a tree to connect the dock to the riverbank. After all that, he's exhausted. It's another day of going hungry. The 3 fish Megan caught last time are enough to last her several days. Today, she decides to make a hammock. She cuts down 5 saplings, strips the branches, and starts weaving the bed. Then, she finds 2 trees to hang the bed. Carefully sitting on it to make sure it can support her, she happily swings on her new hammock. The next day when Fowler returns to the river, the surface is still tumultuous. Clearly no fish today. After a week without proper food, he just hopes the river calms down soon. Back in the cabin, he pulls out the grass roots he collected last time. Looks like he's finally come to eating grass. The grass roots actually tasted pretty good, but Fowler still ended up crying from the frustration. Hunger made him think about dropping out of the race. Megan was scouring the ground for something, pecking around like a chicken. Today was a lucky day. She found a lichen and couldn't wait to stuff it into her mouth. It tasted incredibly fresh, just not enough of it. Then she found some rose hips, which tasted great but had really hard seeds. After eating, Megan woke up in the middle of the night in pain. It turned out a piece of her tooth had been chipped by the seeds, which were stuck in her gums that had now started to inflame. Without treatment, it could get infected. She had to start thinking about whether to stay or go. The rain outside kept pouring down, endless, just like her toothache, painful and relentless. Everyone says a toothache isn't a serious illness, but when it hits, it's unbearable. Many can relate to that. How much longer can Megan hold on? To distract herself, she started weaving a fish basket, but thoughts of her child kept creeping in. To lessen her longing, she didn't even dare bring a picture. But as a mother, she broke down crying anyway. Guilt was eating at her. Suddenly, a boat splashing water approached. Who was leaving this time? There Megan was, anxiously waiting on the shore, utterly defeated by her toothache and missing her kids. When both your body and mind are beaten, you're defenseless. Now, all she wanted was to go home quickly. Carly hasn't had food in days. Her pot for vegetable soup is bone dry. She's so skinny that sitting on the ground hurts her bones, so she pads her seat with her jacket just to eat comfortably. She realizes that just eating grass won't help her win this endurance battle, so she's back at the lake trying to fish again. Fowler has really slimmed down, even getting crow's feet around his eyes. He's on a quest for fat and checks his fishing traps. Recent medical checks were a wake-up call. If he keeps going hungry, dropping out is inevitable. But still, no fish today. To distract himself and feel less hungry, he's chopping bamboo, saying he needs to make more chopsticks. I don't get it. Without food, what's the point of having so many chopsticks? It's day 83. From a distance, this figure reminds me of Dave, but the camera zooms in and it's Fowler. My God, he's gotten so thin. Look at him on day 1, so sturdy and cheerful, full of energy. Chopping bamboo, setting up camp, catching ducks, building houses, practicing yoga, crafting by hand. Day by day, he's wasting away. He's launching his fishing boat again. Will he get food this time? Carly wakes up drooling, saying she misses the fish her boyfriend makes. She's been here nearly 3 months, had fun, been hopeful, sad, confused, collapsed houses, starved herself, feasted and eaten grassroots, made baskets, even drummed. She won't give up until the very last moment. Today is routine medical checkup day, and she's a bit panicky. Her weight has dropped by 30%. On the other hand, Fowler's weight is down 33%. After a series of checks, the medical team is assessing both Carly and Fowler, and they are extremely nervous.
The doctor has found that you're in a critical zone. We're gonna have to extract you for medical reasons.
Carly finally broke down crying. She's always been optimistic and resilient, but physical reasons forced her to leave. She really wanted to win, but her body gave out. By day 87, Fowler didn't even know he had already won. Hearing the sound of a boat, he thought he wouldn't pass the medical check and was ready to be sent home. But after the check, his wife, whom he missed dearly, suddenly hugged him from behind. The couple embraced excitedly.
You won! You won! What?
Then, Fowler excitedly showed his wife his journal, which documented all his experiences here, his shelter, and many of his masterpieces. Now, this year's Christmas presents were ready. With these precious works, they both set off for home. Thus, the 3rd season of Alone came to a successful close.